Good evening, everyone. I'll read out the chairman's introduction and then we'll kick off onto the agenda. So, this is a meeting of the council held in public. It is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave via the exit nearest the large screen at the front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording the meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. And with that, we'll go to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Emma, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, an apology from Councillor Alex Harrison with Councillor Baker as substitute, and apology from Councillor Turner with Councillor Schrader as substitute. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. So, agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to be made by any members here this evening? There's no declarations of interest. So, moving swiftly on to agenda item 3, minutes. Confirmation of the minutes of the Licensing Committee held on the 26th of September 2024. So, for the formality, we'll hold a vote. So, all those in favour of approving the minutes of the committee on the 26th? Lovely. Abstentions? Lovely. Got that, Emma?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Minutes of subcommittees. To note the minutes of the miscellaneous licensing subcommittee meetings held on the 6th of November 2024 and 11th of December 2024. And those minutes are just for noting. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, review of sexual entertainment licensing policy, and I'll hand over to Alex to present the officer report.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the Council's current sex establishment licensing policy was adopted by Cabinet back in 2011. Although there's no statutory requirement to undertake reviews of the policy statement, it is generally accepted to be good practice to carry out this exercise from time to time. Furthermore, there is a commitment set out in the policy statement to carry out periodic reviews to ensure the document remains up to date and relevant. So although there's no specific legal requirement exists for a formal publication, consultation process to be followed, it is proposed that the consultation should be carried out in accordance with the Council's consultation strategy before approval, in accordance with the recommended procedures below. It's recommended that the consultation is carried out on the revised draft policy as shown as enclosure 1, in accordance with the consultation arrangement set out in enclosure 2, and the proposed timeline as shown as enclosure number 3. Members are asked to consider and comment on the draft statement and proposed consultation. So, just a bit of background, the Council has adopted under Schedule 3 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act to enable the local authority to licence sex shops, sex cinemas and sexual entertainment venues within the borough. We currently have 2 venues licensed by the Council under this legislation. Those are sexual entertainment venues. As part of the process for granting licences, the licensing authority has regard to principles laid out in its policy, which was adopted by Cabinet back in 2011. Although that has been reviewed, this will be now the 3rd time that it's been reviewed. The policy review offers an opportunity to update the document to take into account any legislative or any other changes that have occurred since the time of the last review. There are no changes. No massive changes we're planning on this. The direction will still be the same for this policy, but we've added additional information to make it a bit clearer for applicants and for members of the public, and moved some of the appendices into the body of the policy to make it again clearer. There are, like I said, no changes to the intent or direction of the policy. This draft policy contains minimum changes, and they're shaded in grey, any of the changes. So they're basically additions from either additional information for the ease of members of the public and for members and for applicants, as well as moving some of the appendices into the actual body of the document. The policy has been updated to reflect the corporate strategy and aims to maintain a safe, diverse nighttime economy. And it's also been put into the new policy format as well. It should be noted that there are no recorded complaints or legal challenges that have been made concerning any aspects of the policy since its introduction, and there have been no contested applications for sex establishment licensing since the last review of the policy. So the recommendations are that, subject to any amendments required by the committee, the draft sexual entertainment policy shown as enclosure 1 be approved for commencement of the consultation. The consultation on the draft sex entertainment policy be carried out in accordance with the strategy in enclosure number 2. That the revised policy incorporating any minor amendments arising from the consultation be agreed by the Assistant Director of Communities and Leisure in consultation with the Chairman of the Licensing Committee. And that any proposals for significant amendments to the policy arising from the consultation be referred to Licensing Committee for final approval, and that the proposed draft timetable for completing the review of the policy be noted in enclosure number 3. I have got 2 amendments to make to the draft policy. On page 46, under A, it starts with the applicant is unsuitable the licence by reason of having convicted or offence for any other reason. It's missing out to hold within that sentence. So to hold will be added into that sentence on page 46. And again, under page 76, condition point 65, at the end it just ends. Actually, it should have companies at the end of that sentence. So companies will be added to that section on page 76. But other than that, I don't have any other amendments. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And any questions or comments from members to the officer? With that, I think we'll go straight to the votes. So, yeah, the vote for we'll vote on the recommendations as shown on page 2 and 3 of the report and as amended as the officers mentioned. All those in favour? Lovely. That is unanimous. So, moving on to agenda item 6, licensing fees and charges 2025/26. And back over to you, Alex, to present your report.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this report seeks members' agreement on the proposed schedule of fees and charges for the year 25/26 in respect of the general licensing functions, with the exception of any statutory fees which are included for information only. The Licensing Committee is responsible for the consideration and setting of fees in relation to those areas which fall within its remit in accordance with the current scheme of delegations. So a little bit of a background, the Council is entitled to recover reasonable costs associated with the different licensing regimes that it administers. Each licence type is subject to different charging powers, and where discretionary charges are in place, these must be reviewed from time to time to ensure that they reflect the cost of providing the service. Changes in most places aim to achieve full cost recovery, including reasonable costs for administration and, in some cases, not all, enforcement. The charges should not be made. The charges should not be used as a means of raising revenue, nor should income be used to create differences between sort of licence types, so you can't offset one licence for another. So the general licensing fees over the Licensing Committee have discretion of, and subject to the different charging requirements, are listed in the report. The Council Constitution confirms that the Licensing Committee is responsible for the fee setting in respect for these areas of licensing for which it has responsibility, which are again up in the report. Enclosure 1 includes the statutory fees under the Licensing Act 2003 and the Gambling Act 2005, for which there is no discretion to vary. A proportion of all relevant indirect costs can be reasonably attributed to the licensing process, and these can include, for example, officer accommodation, information, communication technology, travel costs, advertising, equipment, postage printing, and other corporate recharge. It is also reasonable to recover a proportion of the costs for running both a licensing committee and respective subcommittees where applicable, and subject to the general principles of recovery. The process continues to be kept under review, having regard to this guidance and relevant case law to ensure the most appropriate and proportionate fee recovery. And as part of this, officers liaise with colleagues from finance, legal and internal audit as necessary. Consideration will always be given to how to create a more streamlined approach, for example, making sure that businesses support in efficient and effective through use of digital process, an increase in self-service, thus minimising costs to both the council and the customer. During last year and into this financial year, we have had additional assistant licensing officer resources have been brought in to cover maternity, and further trainee roles are currently being reviewed to ensure appropriate succession planning is managed within the team. Whilst the number of licensed premises remain fairly stable, the number of Hackney Carriage and private hire driver, vehicles and operators has continued to decline. It is hoped that some of the anticipated amendments to the licensing conditions will help to attract new applicants. And the challenge of cross-border hiring remain both at local and national level, with other authorities experiencing similar declines. I believe some of this has been looked at under the devolution. Licensing has an important role to play in helping the council shape the local area. So, for example, determining of local policies, licence conditions which reflect the demands of the area. All of this work requires funding and is generally accepted principle that licence activities should be funded on a cost recovery basis, paid by those benefiting from the licence activity, rather than drawing on reserves or imposing additional financial burdens on local taxpayers. The taxi and private hire cost centre accounts for all licensing in respect of Hackney Carriage private hire drivers and operators, and then there's a different cost centre for environmental health cost centre which incorporates the fees for skin piercing, caravan, licensing act, gambling act, etc. Further statistics and volumes in relation to the applications and existing licences are shown as enclosure number 2. So as part of the Council's medium-term financial strategy, it's proposing that fees should be subject to an annual increase in line with inflation of 5% unless otherwise stated. The Council continues to consider its financial position in light of changes to its funding structure, and it's possible that this could impact further on the recovery of its appropriate costs through licensing fees. Increases which have been applied have regard to the need to ensure only appropriate cost recovery and the sense checking results from time recording activity. The service regularly carries out benchmarking with other Essex authorities, and whilst this should not form a major determining factor when setting fees, it does provide some sense check of the reasonableness and proportionality of the fees being charged, and that's shown in enclosure number 3. I have put a summary table in here to show what are statutory fees and what have discretionary, and it will tell you if there's an increase or no increase to those. If you want me to read through every single section, I will do, but I think what's probably prevalent is the taxi fees. Those we are proposing to increase by 5%. They haven't been increased since prior to 2018. The process of service design is continuing, although the service has not been able to progress the implementation of this digital platform, as indicated in the previous report last year, due to other demands on the digital team. Some improvements have been made to help streamline the process. So, for example, we've been working on self-booking for knowledge tests, but the improvements anticipated in a wider self-service and time recording capacity has not been delivered. The review of activity is currently ongoing to identify the updated costs associated with the driver's licence to ensure that future cost recovery is appropriately achieved. Part of that is looking at the overarching taxi policy that will go out for consultation this year and come back to committee members, and then we will look it's an intending, so the full policy review and service review in this financial year, which may result in a fee structure change for 26 and 27. So that will include a lot of our time recording that we've done, possible changes to the policy. So there will be a change to the fee structure next year. There is a requirement under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act specifically to advertise proposed fees in relation to vehicles and private hire operators. It is the intention to publicise any change to the driver fees to match the process as a good practice. If there are no objections received, then the fees relating only to the Hackney Carriage private hire vehicles, operators and drivers will become active on the specific date as stated in the notice. Just to let you know, if you agree on the fees and charges today, all the others will go up on the 1st of April, but the Hackney Carriage and private hire ones will have to wait until the advert has finished, so it's a 28-day advert. And then after that, if there's no objections and it doesn't come back, it will be adopted. So that will be later on in April. Alternatively, if objections are received during the consultation period, these will need to be considered by the committee. Overall, there is currently a deficit showing against the taxi licensing accounts, which continues to be addressed through review and efficiency of administration process and updated time recording. This deficit is currently being offset through staff vacancies in the short term. It is anticipated that there will be an opportunity to realign the cost centre allocations as digital processes improve, obviously policy changes, enabling officers to direct resources to where activity is most needed. And again, these vehicle and operator fees have not been increased since prior to 2018. The recommendation is that the proposed fees and charges for all non-statutory fees as outlined in Enclosure 1 be agreed and implemented from April 2025. But just to change that, it would be later for the Hackney carriage, private hire and vehicle ones once the advertising time has been completed. That's the end of my report.
Lovely. Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions or comments from members to the officer? No? Well, I think, yeah, certainly for me it's a straightforward one. I think, Alex, with this item is about cost recovery for the council and ensuring that administrative functions are efficient to try and keep fees down for businesses as well. And I appreciate that while some fees are increasing, we still perform well as a benchmark against other local authorities and their costs as well. And as I think you just said, for private hire operators, I think it's the first increase since, before 2018, so for quite some time. And I think I agree in the report as well. I think it is important to strike the balance between supporting economic growth and managing public health. And I think actually some of them go hand in hand, but I think making sure that there's proper enforcement and the costs are recovered to undertake that enforcement can maintain a level playing field for businesses, to ensure everyone plays by the rules. So I think unless there are any questions or comments, we'll go to the vote. So the recommendation is on page 1 of the report. All those in favour? Lovely, that is unanimous. I think that's the last item on the agenda. We come to the close of the meeting. Wish everyone a safe journey home. Thank you.